By its very nature, the horror genre is littered with the most heinous individuals imaginable committing horrible, unspeakable, and unforgivable acts. While brutality is one way to drum up dread and make an audience uncomfortable, there are so many other ways to have horror hounds wincing in their seats, and at times, there's no better way to get under someone's skin than by serving up a character who is, well, a bit of a creep. In that vein, for this list, we're taking a look at these horror characters who were so ew-inducing, they had you crossing your fingers that something truly dreadful was going to happen to them. I'm Jess from War Culture, and here are horror movie characters who made our skin crawl. Todd Hughes, Hostel Part 2. With his second Hostel offering, Eli Roth gave audiences a character who was absolutely the pits of unlikable. Of course, there's the elite hunting club itself, whose particular business of torture is chillingly sinister. Then there's Stuart, played by Roger Bart, the seemingly meek and mild fella who finds himself winning an auction to commit bloody murder, and then goes full on nuts. The most disturbing, annoying piece of the Hostel 2 puzzle, though, has to be Richard Burgi's Todd Hughes. Essentially a minted jock who never grew up, Todd is nothing but pumped at the idea of getting to terrorize and torture some unsuspecting innocents. In this case, this prick is the winner when it comes to an auction to kill 2 young American girls, those girls being Beth and Bijou Phillips's Whitney. After all of his bravado and general bro behavior, the kicker in Hostel Part 2 is that Todd completely bottles the task at hand when he finally finds himself faced with the tied up Whitney. After accidentally scalping his victim, Todd panics, starts to cry, and tries to leave the elite hunting group facility. Fortunately for audiences, Todd's escape is foiled and he's torn apart by a pack of dogs. Zorro, Franken Hooker. Any chance to talk about Frank Henenlotter's Franken Hooker is a chance that must be taken, right? In Henenlotter's unique 1990s spin on the classic Frankenstein tale, budding scientist Jeffrey Franken blows up a group of hookers with his super crack drug in order to use their body parts to recreate his deceased girlfriend Elizabeth, played by Patty Mullen, with Liz having been decapitated in a tragic lawnmower accident. Overseeing said ladies is their pimp Zorro, who is initially hugely eager to let Lawrence's Jersey boy spend time with his bitches. Well, that is, until all of these women are literally blown up by said super crack, meaning Zorro has now lost his prime source of income. Throughout Franken Hooker, Zorro is forever a total slimeball. Abusive, possessive, and ruling his turf with an iron fist, he continuously has you feeling all kinds of uneasy due to just how all-out gross he is, all while he spouts ridiculously misogynistic lines of dialogue. It's not just the Zorro character who makes you wince here, as the actor who plays him is just terrible. So it's probably not surprising that this was his second and last acting role. Mayor Larry Vaughan, Jaws and Jaws 2. No, Larry, you can't blame this one on a damn barracuda attack, you utter arsehole. Throughout Steven Spielberg's cinema-changing Jaws, Murray Hamilton's Mayor Vaughan is such a frustrating, annoying character who forever has you shaking your head in disbelief. Desperate for the beaches of Amity Island to remain open during their annual boom period of tourism, Vaughan is more than happy, hell, he even encourages others to do the same thing, to look the other way as a giant great white shark stalks the shoreline. In the iconic 1975 picture, Larry cites boating accidents and barracudas as the cause of death when it was actually shark-related. He then also happily proclaims the beach is safe once a tiger shark is caught, despite shark expert Matt Hooper repeatedly telling the arrogant, stubborn Mayor Vaughan that the caught shark is not the shark. Skip ahead to the criminally underrated Jaws 2, and Larry Vaughan is again up to his old tricks. This time, not only does he refuse to believe that a 25-foot shark is terrorizing the waters of Amity, he also gets Martin Brody taken out of office as chief of police. Wilma Northrup, Creepshow. The fourth story of 1982's fantastic Creepshow anthology offering The Crate is a tale that immediately finds Hal Holbrook's Henry Northrup dreaming of killing his wife Wilma, played by Adrienne Barbeau. An aggressive, rude, abusive drunk, Wilma berates and ridicules Henry at every turn, and it's scarily understandable why poor beaten down Henry would like something untoward to happen to his wife. Conveniently, the university that Henry works at just happens to uncover a mysterious crate dated back to 1834. As we would come to find out, said crate contains a furry ape-like being with large teeth and a taste for human flesh. By the time the crate concludes, Henry has lured Wilma into the crosshairs of this toothy beast, who eventually kills and eats Barbeau's obnoxious character. In real life, of course, Adrienne Barbeau is an utter sweetheart who's one of the nicest people in the industry. If you only knew Adrienne from her turn in Creepshow though, you probably wouldn't be feeling so warmly towards her, as audiences were more than happy to see her demise. Trent Sutton, Friday the 13th, 2009. The Friday the 13th franchise is one that offers up plenty of idiots that you're more than happy to hope that Jason Voorhees will snap up and kill in various ways. With that one stupendous line of dialogue, Travis Van Winkle's Trent of the 2009 Friday the 13th remake cements his spot as the biggest annoyance of the whole F-13 series. A cocksure rich kid who loves nothing more than dangling his wealth in front of his peers while acting like a misogynistic douche, every single word that comes out of Trent's mouth makes your skin crawl. Thankfully, in the final act, Trent does run afoul of Jason himself and receives a machete in the back as a reward for his sheer dickheadishness. Jeff, Cabin Fever. You can make up a really substantial amount of this list with just characters invented by Eli Roth, since he really does like to write characters who are just, well, complete dicks. The creepy, overamped Todd of Hostel Part 2 fame has already been covered, and one other Roth creation who cannot be ignored is Joey Kern's Jeff from 2002's Cabin Fever. The eventual death of Jeff at the close of Roth's directorial feature debut was one cheered on by many. It was glorious, it was great, and it was greeted with the sort of positive response usually reserved for seeing the big bad of a film finally toppled. Of course, the reason for such an overwhelmingly positive reaction to Jeff's death is that Roth had set him up as a through and through creep. Then once the shit hit the fan at the realization that a killer virus was in play, Jeff went into self-preservation mode, disowning his friends and girlfriend, taking all of their beer and heading off into hiding. So when Jeff turns up again in the movie's final moments and celebrates having survived, you can't help but smile when he's gunned down by a bunch of local lawmen. Joseph, Creep and Creep 2. Is it Joseph? Is it Bill? Is it Aaron? It's unlikely that any of these are the true moniker of the series lead of the Creep franchise. Whatever his real name is, Mark Duplass's Creep and Creep 2 character is someone who is majorly unsettling once you see his true colors start to shine through. What makes Joseph, Bill, Aaron eerily troubling, particularly in that first Creep, is how he's depicted as being somewhat playful, a tad eccentric and totally sympathetic, that being down to how his faux story at the start of that 2014 picture is that he has an inoperable brain tumor and wants to make a video for his unborn child. The skin-crawling reveals start coming thick and fast in Creep, with Joseph first explaining how he raped his wife, then we hear stark warnings from his sister, and then Joseph's hired filmmaker Aaron, played by Patrick Bryce, ends up tormented and eventually killed by Duplass's twisted soul. Creep 2 continues to showcase this chilling presence, as Joseph takes on the Aaron name and becomes entangled with YouTuber Sarah, all of which culminates in him trying to convince her to commit suicide with him. Yuck. Mick Taylor, Wolf Creek and Wolf Creek 2. Such an unsettling, chilling character is Mick Taylor that apparently actor John Jarratt had trouble finding work for 2 years after the picture came out in 2005. Some of the characters featured on this list may be self-serving creeps, others may be misogynistic dickheads, and there are others who have truly sinister, bloodthirsty intentions in mind. For Wolf Creek's Mick, he ticks all of these boxes and then some. As Wolf Creek unravels, we come to learn that Taylor is a racist, homophobic, sexist, generally xenophobic killer who has a penchant for methodical stalking and calculated torture. On top of that, there's also hints that Mick is a cannibal, because I guess he needed more things to make us find him absolutely terrifying. Mick Taylor is every inch a psychopath who enjoys what he does and enjoys toying with his victims like the proverbial cat with a mouse. And it's this enjoyment and sense of gamemanship that makes Mick such an uncomfortable proposition, both for those characters who come across him and for those watching his actions play out on their screens. Richie Gecko, From Dusk Till Dawn. For full disclosure, Quentin Tarantino's Richie Gecko is actually the character who inspired this entire list. Robert Rodriguez's From Dusk Till Dawn is such a brilliant mishmash of a movie, flitting between being a road movie, an action movie, and a horror movie, all while being a ridiculously cool movie. While George Clooney's Seth Gecko merges from an all-out criminal to an anti-hero of sorts while this 1996 picture plays out, Seth's brother Richie doesn't quite follow in the same trajectory. Instead, Richie is a self-serving, lying, manipulative douchebag and continues to be, right up until we see him get turned into a vampire and then killed off. Of course, that's not even mentioning the grim fact that Richie is a convicted sex offender, and his early movie rape and murder of a female bank clerk is then followed by him constantly leering over Juliette Lewis's Kate Fuller. The interactions between Richie and Kate are clearly troubling, but the most chilling moments of From Dusk Till Dawn are the exchanges between Tarantino's character and the doomed bank clerk who is left in his charge while Seth goes hunting for supplies. Krug Stillo. The Last House on the Left. Wes Craven famously created Freddy Krueger, yet one could still argue that The Last House on the Left's Krug Stillo is an even more stomach-turning figure than the dream-tampering Krueger. Given how Freddy is a burned-alive serial child killer who then returned to kill a bunch of young adults, that's really saying something. Yet that's exactly what David Hess's Krug manages to do. Craven's directorial debut, well, not counting those skin flicks he helmed under several pseudonyms, The Last House on the Left is a film which caused huge controversy upon its release, due to the sheer graphic nature of what was shown and suggested in this 1972 effort. So much of that shocking content revolving around Krug. To run off a grim laundry list of Krug's actions in The Last House on the Left, there's the kidnap of teenagers Mari and Phyllis, there's the torture of these two girls, there's the rape of the pair, there's the duo's inevitable death, and there's also the fact that Krug keeps his own son addicted to heroin as a way to manipulate him. Rarely has horror cinema seen a character as outright disturbing and disgusting as Krug Stillo.
Dr. Frederick Chilton in The Silence of the Lambs. In The Silence of the Lambs, FBI trainer Clarice Starling is tasked with interviewing the psychopath Hannibal Lecter, who's imprisoned in a mental institution. Because of Anthony Hopkins' tour de force performance, you can't help finding Hannibal charming, despite his nasty habit of cannibalizing his victims. Even though Hannibal is a monster, he's nowhere near as creepy as his facilitator Dr. Frederick Chilton. Rarely in the history of cinema has there been a character with a more punchable face than this smug weasel. He doesn't seem capable of making a single utterance without licking his lips or flashing a smarmy smile. Despite the fact he's running a facility for the most dangerous people in the country, he talks about his patients like prized specimens. He relishes the power he has over Hannibal when he speaks to him. He's such a slimeball, he can't speak to Clarice for more than a minute without making a pass at her. Although he pretends to care about helping others, he's noticeably jealous when Clarice makes more progress with Hannibal than his staff. The climax implies Hannibal will kill Chilton in the foreseeable, but it's still a shame we didn't see the little pipsqueak get his just desserts. Mrs. Carmody in The Mist. In The Mist, a group of interdimensional monsters spill into a town on Maine, forcing the residents to seek refuge in a supermarket. While our protagonist, David Drayton, tries to keep everyone calm, a religious zealot called Mrs. Carmody exasperates the situation by convincing her patrons Armageddon is upon them. Preying on their fears, Carmody convinces the rabble that she's the only one who can lead them to salvation. Simply put, Mrs. Carmody is a deeply nasty person. She's spiteful, petty, unreasonable, power-hungry, delusional, and manipulative. Also, the way she compares Amanda to a piece of crap when she tries to comfort her was totally uncalled for. However, what makes Carmody so unsettling is how much sway she has over her peers. Using manipulative rhetoric, she turns law-abiding citizens into a murderous mob within minutes. As her influence grows, so does her power, since she can command her lackeys to perform acts of evil with minimal effort. In fact, David believes Mrs. Carmody is so destructive, he leaves the market, believing he has a better chance of survival against the hellish monsters. Frank in The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane opens with Ryan Jacobs celebrating her 13th birthday. While she's alone in the house, the landlady's son, Frank, makes an unannounced call. Realizing there's no one else there, Frank keeps stopping by, hoping to ignite a sexual relationship with Ryan. Frank isn't menacing from the get-go, but the way he barges into Ryan's home and sits down like he owns the place immediately puts you on edge. Ryan looks violated every time Frank picks up something or touches her possessions. especially her poor hamster. When Ryan calls her nosy neighbour out on his inappropriate behaviour, he attempts to reassure her by repeatedly emphasising he has children of his own. Despite his best efforts, Frank is incapable of shaking off his predatory stench. Although he keeps reminding Ryan she's a child, his body language makes his carnal intentions unmistakable. When Frank doesn't get what he wants, the crazed pervert turns into a violent maniac in a heartbeat. Because of his volcanic temper, Frank is scarier when he's calm, since we know he's always a moment away from blowing up. Howard in 10 Cloverfield Lane. After Michelle is involved in a car accident, she awakens inside a bomb shelter with two strangers, Howard and Emmett. Howard informs her a mysterious attack on the country has left the area irradiated, forcing them to live underground. On the surface, Howard should be trustworthy. He personally rescued Michelle from the car crash and nursed her back to health. He spent years prepping his bunker, filling it with enough food and medical equipment to keep them alive for years. He also supplied the facility with puzzles and movies to keep their minds stimulated. When you take all of that into account, it looks like Howard is the perfect person to be stuck in a bunker with. But despite his outward appearance, you know something's wrong with Howard immediately. Long before he becomes violent, we can tell there's something not right about him. When he tries to sound friendly and protective, Howard always comes across as guarded, making it impossible to know what he's thinking. Although he has moments of explosive anger, it's the quiet moments when you know Howard is at his most dangerous. Alvin Marsh in It. Throughout It, Beverly Marsh finds herself being tormented by the shape-shifting entity Pennywise. But in many ways, her father is much more frightening. Despite the fact Alvin Marsh views himself as a protector, he's anything but. Based on the way he caresses Beverly's face and sniffs her hair, it's obvious Alvin has a disturbing attraction to his daughter. What makes Alvin more shady is the way he acts like he cares for Beverly. While beating his child, Alvin tells her how much he worries about his bevy. He regularly gaslights her, assuring Beverly he's the only one she can trust. Also, the way he asks her if she's still my little girl is downright sickening. When Beverly ultimately rejects him, Alvin gives up all pretenses and flat out tries to rape her. Alvin is so repulsive, he does something that sounds unfeasible. He makes you defend Pennywise. Yes, the menacing clown eats kids, but that's only because it's in his nature. However, Alvin goes against his nature as a parent, since he violates Beverly physically and mentally. Pennywise may be the antagonist, but he's entertaining and surprisingly funny. Alvin, on the other hand, doesn't have a single redeemable quality. Howard and Pearl in X. In X, a group of filmmakers hire out an elderly couple's guest house to film a porno. As you do. When the couple, Howard and Pearl, discover the nature of the movie being made, things quickly take a dark turn. The moment this pair appear, we know something is sketchy about them, and not just because Howard threatens the director with a shotgun upon their first meeting. When Pearl offers one of the actresses a glass of lemonade, you can just sense this unexplainable hostility in the room. When Howard assures his company his gun isn't loaded, the disdain in his face warns us no one should be left alone with him. But the real reason why Howard and Pearl freak us out is because they look so odd. Although their faces are never seen clearly, their discoloured skin, blackened eyes, and skeletal frames make viewers restless. Despite their frail appearance, there is something about the couple's body language that shows they intend harm on those around them. Even if Howard and Pearl never did anything inappropriate, which they totally do, they'd still be terrifying purely because of how intense they are. Peter in Funny Games. In Funny Games, two sociopaths, Peter and Paul, force themselves into the Showbers' cabin to terrorise the family. Because there's no rhyme or reason for the duo's actions, the Showbers can't negotiate with them, leaving them no choice but to take part in their twisted games. Despite the fact Paul is the more sadistic of the pair, there's something about Peter that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. Because Paul is articulate and well-educated, he doesn't seem imposing at first, which is why he initially comes across as trustworthy. But when Peter is introduced, you get a bad vibe from him straight away. When he first appears, he asks his neighbour to borrow some eggs. In itself, this request sounds harmless. However, the way Peter awkwardly positions his body and fails to pick up on social cues implies he's unhinged. Although it's sickening when Paul orders the mother to get undressed, the way Peter silently gawks at her like a predatory animal is more alarming. Even though Paul has to get violent to come across as scary, all Peter has to do is stand there. Keith in Barbarian. There are certain human characteristics that everyone finds unsettling. If someone is eyeballing you, standing too close, or has a peculiar smile, your brain urges you to be on your guard. But do you know what else is creepy? Trying not to be creepy. A perfect example to illustrate this point is the 2022 horror Barbarian. The movie opens with Tess arriving at an Airbnb only to learn it's already occupied by a man called Keith. With nowhere else to go, Tess is forced to stay with this stranger for the night. Because of the awkward situation, Keith does all he can to make sure Tess feels comfortable. Unfortunately, all his efforts make things more tense. He pushes Tess to have a cup of tea so much you're certain he spiked it. When Keith tells Tess he wants her to watch him open a bottle of wine to prove he's not doing anything fishy, you're more convinced he's trying to drug her. Even when Tess starts to relax in Keith's company, there's something about this guy that makes it impossible to trust him. Annie Wilkes in Misery. In Misery, respected novelist Paul Sheldon is rescued by a nurse called Annie Wilkes after he gets into a car crash. After she takes Paul back to her home and nurses him back to health, he initially sees Annie as his guardian angel. As he spends more time with her, Paul realizes his savior is completely insane. Now, Annie Wilkes may not be the evilest villain in movie history. However, when it comes to cinema's most unsettling characters, Annie Wilkes has cornered the market. Although she comes across as a caring person at first, like most creepy villains, Annie's demeanour is different because it's not a facade. She has no malicious intentions towards Paul at first and is more than happy to care for him. Only after her insecurities get the better of her do we see the true monster that lies within. Anyone who's seen this Stephen King adaptation remembers the fear they felt when Annie yells at Paul or screams about the cock-a-doodle car. But what makes these scenes more unsettling is how Annie reverts to her cheery manner immediately after. Everyone remembers how disturbing it was to watch Annie crush Paul's ankles with a sledgehammer. However, this moment is made more unnerving by how she says, "God, I love you," straight after with fervent conviction.